By the end of this video, you'll discover how depth of processing, one of the core traits of highly sensitive people, shapes the way you experience everything, from conversations and decisions to your closest relationships. In this video, you'll discover 5 subtle ways depth of processing shows up in your everyday life as an HSP, why this trait often gets mistaken for overthinking or indecision, and how to start appreciating your depth instead of trying to hide it. We hear the word depth of processing a lot in relation to being a highly sensitive person. But what does that actually look like? What does that actually mean when it comes to everyday life? Let's look at a few different kinds of examples. First of all, depth of processing means that you reflect on conversations long after they're over. You tend to replay what was said and how it was said and what it really meant. And so even casual interactions can spark deeper reflection. Did I come across the way I intended? What were they feeling under the surface? You don't just hear words, you hear layers underneath them. So for example, maybe you're driving home from lunch with a friend and you're thinking about the conversation. It was warm and they seemed happy to see you. Obviously nothing wrong there. But one comment won't leave you alone. Maybe you remember when they said, "You've been really quiet lately. Is everything okay?" And you may have brushed it off at the time and said you were just tired, but now your mind is starting to think about it. Did I seem off? Were they hurt by my energy? Am I pulling away without realizing it? And a deeper question arises also. Is there something going on for me that I'm not even fully aware of? This isn't overthinking. This is depth of processing in action. This is the HSP trait that leads you to reflect not only on what happened, but on what it means and what it might be pointing to inside of you. So even a casual moment becomes a doorway for deeper self-understanding. And yes, it sometimes is exhausting, but this is also what makes you wise and self-aware and capable of incredible growth. Another example of depth of processing is how it shows up in life is that decisions feel more like emotional investments than just something that you need to do. You don't just weigh pros and cons, you consider the ripple effect. Like, how will this impact my future self? And will this align with who I'm becoming? Even small choices can feel loaded because they're not just choices. They're tied to meaning, values, and long-term consequences. So for example, say you're standing in the grocery store looking at 2 different jars of peanut butter, and to anyone else it looks simple. But in your mind, you're weighing price, you're weighing ingredients, you're thinking about how your body reacts to sugar, you're considering whether your partner likes this brand, you're considering the company's ethics, and you're also thinking about if the glass jar will fit in your cupboard. So this is not being indecisive. What's happening here is you're processing deeply. You're considering the ripple effects of a seemingly tiny choice. That's not a flaw. It's part of how your mind honors what matters. A third way that depth of processing can show up in everyday life is how you pick up on patterns that most people miss. You notice connections between things, themes, causes, recurring dynamics. You're the one who says, wait, this feels familiar. There's something deeper going on here. So whether it's in your life or in the life of others, you tend to zoom out and make meaning from what others tend to brush past. So for example, after a dinner with friends, maybe you're lying in bed replaying a moment and thinking about it, and you're wondering, did I talk too much about work? Or why did Sarah go quiet after I said that? Or maybe I misunderstood her tone. What was she really saying? This isn't about obsessing. You're trying to understand the emotional undercurrents. You felt something shift and your mind wants clarity. That's depth of processing in action. not overthinking, just caring deeply about connection and meaning. A fourth way that you can see depth of processing in action in everyday life is how, as an HSP, we tend not to let go of things that feel unresolved. So maybe it's an awkward moment or an unanswered message or an emotional gap in a relationship. These things stay with us. Our system naturally seeks closure and coherence. That's what meaning is. And so until that happens, your mind is going to naturally keep turning it over, not to obsess, but to try to digest what happened. So imagine after a long phone call with your sibling, you suddenly remember something that they said offhand maybe a few weeks ago. And at the time, it didn't register as something important, but now something clicks into place because of something new that they said. And you pause and you reevaluate that past conversation in the light of this new detail. And then you might realize something about them. Maybe you realize that they were feeling overwhelmed and they've been feeling that way for a while. And that's why they snapped today. So others might let moments like this pass, but you as a highly sensitive person instinctively look for emotional threads that tie things together. That's depth of processing. Your mind naturally revisits moments, not to dwell, but to complete the emotional puzzle and to bring clarity to what was really going on. And then another area where depth of processing, like what it looks like when it shows up in everyday life, is this tendency to seek depth in connection and maybe to withdraw if it's not deep. You may crave meaningful conversations and emotionally safe places that allow you to go deeper. And surface level chit-chat can feel draining and pointless. So you may prefer to be alone than stuck in a room where you feel unseen or unexpressed. Because when you connect all the way. That's HSP. So for example, maybe you're at a party making small talk about the weather and weekend plans like everyone else. And after a few minutes, your energy dips, not because you're asocial, but because nothing real is being said here. And then someone mentions that they've been struggling a bit with a big life decision, and suddenly your energy perks up again. It's not that you need to go and fix it, but it's that you're interested. Finally, there's something worth connecting over. Finally, there's some depth being brought in, and this is attractive. So depth of processing shows up this way in relationships. We are wired for what is real, what is deep, and when that's missing, our system can kind of quietly check out. So why does this trait get mistaken for overthinking or indecision? It's easy to confuse the two at first. Depth of processing and overthinking and indecision seem to go hand in hand. Oh, you guys, you HSPs, you overthink everything, or you're so indecisive. You make things so complicated. But what's really going on is that, yes, it does take time for us to make decisions. It does take us time to come to the bottom of things, to really understand something. And that does require thinking, no doubt. But there's a difference between naturally reflecting on information more deeply and coming to conclusions, as opposed to looping because you're stuck. That's where it's more of a stress reaction, and that's what people tend to confuse it for. But depth of processing is not stressful. It's something enjoyable, and it's something that we do naturally. We're exploring. We're looking for meaning. We're looking for nuance. And that is really the path of a researcher. That's the path of someone who loves knowledge, who loves understanding, and wants to really see things at the root. But to someone else, it may look like, oh, you just can't decide, or you're making it too complicated. The difference is depth of processing means you're being thorough. It's not the same as being hesitant, which is more fear-based. Another way to see how easy it is to confuse depth of processing with overthinking or indecision is that we tend to consider multiple angles on everything. We think about things from every point of view, and we notice inconsistencies. We compare the different points of view. We try to get to the deeper understanding of a situation. And this can cause us to pause before choosing something, not necessarily out of fear, but because we're paying attention to so many subtle pieces. So we're not overanalyzing. We're analyzing in a way that is respecting the natural complexity of any given situation. And some people just don't care about that natural complexity. They just focus on a more simple kind of decision making, and that's fine. It works in many ways. But there's nothing wrong with the HSP way of making decisions or analyzing things that is thorough and very aware of all the nuance. And then another reason that sometimes depth of processing can get confused with being with having indecision or overthinking is that we tend to revisit things internally. And this process goes deeply. It can take time to replay, and we're going to naturally replay conversations, unpack an idea over time. And this reflective process can be mistaken for rumination or worry, when actually what it actually is just integration. And both things can happen. You can get into rumination, which is stress related, but it's not a part of being an HSP. HSP means you process things naturally in a non-stressful way, thoroughly. Stress, when it gets added to the equation, brings in the element of fear or brings in the element of need or anything like that, that is going to make you start obsessing in a stressful way. So if you want to tell if you're really overthinking or not, pay attention to your stress level and it will tell you. So in short, depth of processing is active and it's a meaningful engagement with life, whereas overthinking is circular and is usually rooted in anxiety. They look similar, but they come from very different places. So how do you start appreciating your depth instead of trying to hide it? First of all, we have to realize that this is a superpower. This is something very special, and it's unique to this particular nervous system that can actually look at things and go into depth in whatever it is considering. So naming this as a superpower is a big step to feeling like there's something good about it instead of thinking that you're just too slow or too complicated or what everyone else may want to tell you. So what is a superpower? We notice emotional shifts that others miss. This is a skill. This is a gift, actually. We think through consequences before acting. We're capable of thinking through so thoroughly that we actually don't even run into any problems when we actually take action. We bring richness and meaning to relationships. We're often the ones that hold relationships together and allow them to go deeper. This is not overthinking, and this is something that is rare, it's something valuable, and it's what we bring to the table as highly sensitive people. The other thing that can make a big difference is to stop comparing your pace to the pace of other people. Your mind isn't slow, it's thorough. When you stop judging your process against fast-paced and people who move quickly, our whole surface level world, you can see that what you bring isn't hesitation, it's wisdom. It's a chance to go deeper. My grandmother used to call it being methodical. I love that word. Just step by step. And it's going to take some time. And I don't know how long it'll take, but that is being thorough, not, there's nothing slow in the off way. It's nothing off about being slow in that way. And another way that you can begin to appreciate this trait is to shift from hiding it to honoring it. So instead of shrinking your responses to feel like you're easygoing and kind of put on that air of like, oh yeah, no big deal, I'm just, or pretending to make decisions quickly when you actually don't, I love just owning it, just saying, hey, I need a moment to think about that. Or can you give me a day or two? And that just gives me all the freedom in the world to find my truth and come back. Or you can say something like, I care about getting this right, so I'm going to reflect a little more about it. Or this is important to me, and that's why I'm taking my time. This kind of communication shows self-respect as opposed to the kind of apologetic communication that can happen if you're thinking that, oh, I'm just too slow or I overthink things. In this episode, we looked at 5 subtle ways depth of processing shows up in your everyday life as an HSP. And we saw it has to do with reflecting on conversations long after they're over, decisions feeling like emotional investments, and then picking up on patterns that most people miss, and not letting go of things until they feel resolved, and seeking depth in connection, or maybe moving to withdraw. We also looked at why this trait often gets mistaken for overthinking or indecision. Both take time, yes, but there's a big difference. One is stressful, and the other is just our natural ability. And then finally, we looked at how to start appreciating your depth instead of trying to hide it. And this comes down to stopping comparing your pace to the pace of other people. Tired of feeling overwhelmed by everything all at once? Take the HSP stress test at trueinnerfreedom.com. The test will reveal your unique sensitivity profile, including how your nervous system naturally responds to stimulation, emotions, social energy, and more. You'll also gain a clearer picture of how stress might be amplifying that sensitivity. Take the HSP stress test now. It's a powerful first step on your journey to true inner freedom.